I never thought I'd be that dad. You know the type. Showing up to every practice with snacks nobody asked for, volunteering for team events, staying late to help pack up equipment. But when you're raising two boys on your own, you become whatever they need you to be. And right now, at 7 and 9 years old, what Tyler and Mason needed was someone who showed up. So I showed up. The divorce had been final for 8 months when Mason started asking about soccer. His best friend from school had joined a recreational league, and suddenly it was all he could talk about. Tyler, being the younger one and wanting everything his big brother had, immediately demanded to play too. I knew nothing about soccer. I'd been a basketball kid growing up, but I found myself on a Saturday morning registration website at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, signing them both up before I could overthink it. That's how I met Coach Adrian. The first practice was chaos. 20 kids between the ages of 6 and 10, all with varying levels of interest and ability, running in approximately the same direction while parents stood on the sidelines with their coffee cups and conversations. I was late because Tyler couldn't find his left cleat, which turned out to be under Mason's bed for reasons neither of them could explain. We rushed onto the field, both boys already arguing about something, and I was doing that frazzled single-parent thing where you're trying to look put together while very clearly falling apart. That's when I saw him. He was standing in the center of the field, whistle around his neck, dark hair slightly messy like he'd been running his hands through it. He wore a navy blue coaching jacket and had this presence about him, calm but authoritative. When he smiled at the kids gathering around him, something in my chest did this unexpected flutter thing that I immediately tried to ignore. I'm Logan, by the way, 34, high school English teacher, single father, and apparently not as straight as I'd spent 3 decades assuming I was. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That first practice, I watched Adrian work with the kids. He was patient in a way that seemed effortless, breaking down drills into simple steps, encouraging the shy ones, gently redirecting the wild ones. Mason, who could be stubborn and resistant to new authority figures, listened to him. Tyler, who had the attention span of a goldfish, stayed focused. It was impressive. After practice, Adrian approached me while I was trying to wrangle both boys and their gear. "You're Mason and Tyler's dad?" he asked, and his voice was warm, friendly. Up close, I noticed his eyes were this deep brown, almost amber in the sunlight. "Yeah, that's me." "Logan," I said, probably too quickly. "Sorry we were late. Cleat emergency." He laughed, and it was genuine. I've coached long enough to know that cleat emergencies are very real and very serious. He knelt down to the boys' level. "You two did great today. I can tell you're going to be good players." Tyler beamed. Mason, harder to impress, gave a small nod that I recognized as high praise. As we walked to the car, Mason said, "I like Coach Adrian. He's cool." I agreed, though I didn't say it out loud. There was no reason for the way my heart rate had picked up during that brief conversation, no explanation for why I kept replaying his laugh in my head on the drive home. I chalked it up to stress, to being overwhelmed, to the general chaos of my life. It didn't mean anything, except I found myself looking forward to Tuesday practice with an anticipation that felt disproportionate to watching children kick a ball around a field. Over the next few weeks, I became one of those involved parents. I helped set up cones. I cheered enthusiastically from the sidelines. I learned the actual rules of soccer through frantic Google searches, and I talked to Adrian a lot. He'd share stories about his coaching experiences, ask about my job, joke about the various kid dramas that unfolded during practice. Our conversations started extending beyond practice time. We'd stand in the parking lot talking while the boys played on the nearby playground equipment, losing track of time until one of them would run up demanding a snack or bathroom break. I learned he was 29, had played soccer in college, worked as a physical therapist during the day, and coached because he loved working with kids. He was funny in this dry, understated way that caught me off guard and made me laugh harder than I had in months. He remembered details I mentioned in passing, like how Mason was struggling with reading comprehension or how Tyler had a thing about wearing only blue socks. I told myself we were becoming friends. Just friends. The fact that I thought about him at odd moments during the day meant nothing. The fact that I started putting actual effort into what I wore to practice, that I made sure I'd shaved, that I felt a spike of disappointment on the rare occasions when his assistant coach ran practice instead, all of that was just normal friend stuff. Then came the rainy Tuesday in October that changed everything. Practice was cancelled, but I didn't get the message until we were already at the field. The weather had been threatening all day, and apparently Adrian had sent out a team email 2 hours earlier that I'd missed in the chaos of getting through the school day and picking up the kids. We stood in the empty parking lot, rain starting to fall in heavy drops, and I was about to load disappointed children back into the car when Adrian's truck pulled in. He jogged over, jacket pulled up over his head. I figured someone might not get the message. I'm sorry, I should have sent it earlier. It's fine, I said, even though Tyler was already whining about wanting to practice and Mason had that disappointed slump to his shoulders that killed me. We'll survive. Adrian looked at the boys, then at me, then seemed to make a decision. Hey, there's a pizza place 2 blocks from here. What if I buy you guys dinner to make up for the wasted trip? Unless you have other plans. I should have said no. I should have recognized the way my pulse jumped at the invitation as a sign that this was becoming something I wasn't ready to examine. Instead, I said, "Pizza sounds great." The restaurant was one of those local places with checkered tablecloths and a game room in the back. Adrian insisted on paying despite my protests, and the boys immediately ran off to play arcade games with the quarters he gave them, which left us alone at a booth, rain pattering against the windows, and suddenly I was very aware that this felt less like a casual team thing and more like something else entirely. We talked easily like we always did, but there was something different about the setting, about the intimacy of sitting across from each other in the warm lighting of the restaurant. He asked about my ex-wife, and I found myself being more honest than I'd been with most people. It wasn't dramatic, I said, spinning my water glass between my hands. No cheating, no big fights. We just grew apart. Or maybe we were never really together in the way we should have been. She's a good person. We're good co-parents, but the marriage itself was like wearing shoes that almost fit. You can walk around in them, but they're never quite comfortable. Adrian nodded, his expression thoughtful. That must have been hard to admit. It was harder to stay, I said quietly. Then, because the conversation felt safe enough, I asked, "What about you? Girlfriend? Boyfriend?" I tried to make it sound casual, like I was just asking to be friendly, but my heart hammered waiting for his answer. He met my eyes, and something flickered in his expression. No girlfriend? I dated a guy for a while last year, but it didn't work out. He wanted different things. Oh. The relief that flooded through me was immediately followed by confusion about why I felt relieved. I managed to say something like, "That's tough," but my mind was racing. Adrian was gay. Adrian had just casually come out to me. Adrian was watching my reaction with an openness that suggested this was somehow important. The boys came running back, demanding more quarters, and the moment passed. But something had shifted. As we said goodbye in the parking lot, rain still falling, Adrian touched my arm briefly and said, "Thanks for coming tonight. I had a really good time." "Me too," I said, and meant it more than was probably wise. That night, after the boys were asleep, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I kept replaying the evening, the conversation, the way Adrian had looked at me when he mentioned dating a guy, the way he'd smiled, the way I'd felt sitting across from him, the way I'd been feeling for weeks now. I'd been married to a woman for 10 years. I'd never questioned my sexuality, never wondered, never considered that I might be anything other than straight. But as I lay there in the dark, I had to confront the obvious truth I'd been avoiding. What I felt when I was around Adrian wasn't friendship. It was attraction. It was interest. It was the kind of nervous, excited, can't stop thinking about you feeling I hadn't experienced since I was a teenager. I was attracted to Adrian, to a man, to my son's soccer coach. The realization didn't come with panic, which surprised me. Instead, it felt like something clicking into place, like finally understanding a question I hadn't known I was asking. Maybe this was why my marriage had felt like ill-fitting shoes. Maybe this was why I'd never felt that spark everyone talked about, that consuming passion. Maybe I'd been looking in the wrong direction my entire adult life. But knowing it and doing something about it were very different things. I had my kids to think about. I had a small-town teaching job where rumors spread fast. I had an ex-wife who'd be confused and possibly hurt. And I had no idea if Adrian's openness meant he was interested or if I was reading into things because I wanted them to be there. So I did nothing. I went to practices and games and tried to act normal. But I was hyper-aware of everything now. The way Adrian's hand would brush mine when he handed me equipment. The way he'd seek me out in the crowd of parents. The way our conversations lingered. The way he looked at me sometimes with this expression I couldn't quite read but that made my stomach flips. 3 weeks after the pizza dinner, after a particularly good game where Mason scored his first goal and Tyler made a save, Adrian approached me with that slightly nervous energy that I'd started to recognize. "Hey, I know this is maybe weird," he started, running a hand through his hair. "But would you want to grab coffee sometime? Without the kids, I mean. Just us." My heart stopped, then started again, faster. "Like a date?" I asked before I could stop myself. He held my gaze. "Yeah, like a date, if that's something you'd be interested in. If I'm reading this completely wrong, we can pretend I never asked and just be friends. But I think maybe I'm not reading it wrong." He wasn't. God, he wasn't. But standing there in the afternoon sun with my kids playing nearby and other parents milling around, I felt the weight of everything this meant. Coming out. Explaining to my boys. Navigating what people would say. Figuring out who I was at 34 years old. Adrian saw my hesitation. "You don't have to answer now. Think about it." No pressure. But I'd been thinking about it for weeks, hadn't I? I'd been thinking about nothing else. And standing there looking at him, at this man who was kind to my children and made me laugh and saw me in a way I wasn't sure anyone ever had, I realized I was tired of being afraid. "Yes," I said. "Coffee sounds good. Sounds really good, actually." His smile was like sunrise. "Yeah?" "Yeah." We made plans for Saturday afternoon. My ex had the boys that weekend, which felt like the universe aligning. I was nervous in a way I hadn't been since I was 16. I changed my shirt 3 times. I got to the coffee shop 15 minutes early and then sat in my car for 10 of those minutes trying to calm down. Adrian was already inside when I walked in, sitting at a corner table, and when he saw me his whole face lit up. That's when I knew this was real, that I hadn't imagined or exaggerated what was happening between us. We talked for 3 hours. The coffee shop closed and we moved to a park, walking the trails as the afternoon turned to evening. We talked about everything. Coming out stories, his at 19, mine apparently happening in real time, past relationships and future hopes, what it was like being a single parent. What it was like coaching kids and seeing them grow, books we loved, movies that made us cry, the small details that make up a life. And then, on a quiet section of trail with the sun setting through the trees, he stopped walking and turned to me. "I really want to kiss you right now," he said, "but only if that's okay." I'd never kissed a man before. I'd never wanted to until Adrian. "It's okay," I managed to say. "It's more than okay." He stepped closer, gave me one more moment to change my mind, and then kissed me. It was gentle and sure and nothing like anything I'd experienced before. It felt like coming home to a place I'd never been. It felt like the first honest thing I'd done in years. When we broke apart, I was smiling so hard my face hurt. "So that's what it's supposed to feel like," I said. He laughed, his forehead resting against mine. "Yeah, that's what it's supposed to feel like." We started dating, carefully at first, figuring out how to navigate it with the boys and the team. But kids are more perceptive than you think. 2 weeks in, Mason asked me directly if Coach Adrian was my boyfriend. I'd been terrified of this conversation, had rehearsed a dozen different ways to explain it. But Mason just said, "Cool, he's nice. Can we have tacos for dinner?" Tyler's response was to ask if this meant we'd get more pizza dinners. When I said probably yes, he declared it the best news ever. The other parents were a mixed bag. Some were supportive, some were quietly disapproving, some didn't seem to care. A few pulled their kids from the team, which hurt but also felt like a necessary filtering. The people who mattered, who saw Adrian for the incredible coach and person he was, they stayed. They supported us. My ex-wife was confused at first, then understanding in that way that made me realize she'd probably known something was off long before I did. "I just want you to be happy," she told me. Really happy, not pretending happy. And I was. I am. It's been 6 months now, and Adrian has become part of our lives in a way that feels inevitable. He comes to dinner at our house. The boys ask him for help with homework. We navigate this new shape of our family with patience and care and more love than I knew I was capable of. Last week, after tucking the boys into bed, Adrian and I sat on my back porch watching the stars come out. He reached over and took my hand, threading our fingers together. "I'm glad you showed up to practice that day," he said quietly. "I'm glad Mason wanted to play soccer. I'm glad Tyler lost his cleat," I laughed. "I'm glad you asked me for coffee." He turned to look at me, and in his eyes I saw everything we'd built and everything we were still building. "I'm glad you said yes." I kissed him then, this man who'd helped me understand who I really was, who loved my children, who made me laugh and feel seen and completely myself. This man I'd found by accident while just trying to be a good dad. Sometimes the life you're meant to live finds you in the most unexpected places. Sometimes it takes raising boys alone and showing up to soccer practice and a coach asking you for coffee. Sometimes it takes being brave enough to say yes when everything in your careful, planned life is telling you to say no. I said yes, and it changed everything, and I would say yes 1,000 times over. Because this, right here, this is what it feels like when the shoes finally fit.